Some years ago, 10 years ago in fact, my buddy, who I'll call Scott, whose book I'd edited, called me and said, I was at a conference and I met the most amazing woman. She's written a memoir, and I really hope that you'll edit it. So, that was interesting, and I took her number and I called her, Angela, in Kansas, and I had her send me a couple of her chapters, and I was hooked. Her writing was rough, but the memoir was indeed compelling. It was the story of how she'd had a really difficult childhood, had ended up a drug addict, had struggled with addiction for almost 20 years, and then had found recovery. So I knew that it would need a lot of editing and redoing, but there was definitely a real story there. As I got to really get into the book and know Angela, I learned her whole story. She had struggled with addiction since she was 15 or 16 years old. She had amazing strength as well as just incredible tragedies in her life. She had periods when she was doing really well. She became a hairdresser. She went to college. She cared as a very devoted mother to whichever children were in her home. And then, through some combination of bad luck and bad choices, she would relapse. She would lose her job. She would drop out of college. She would find yet another bad two-timing, drug-using boyfriend who abused her. And usually she'd get pregnant. She'd lose whichever kids she had in the home. She'd then, decide that she was going to start over again with this new child. She'd go to rehab, she'd get clean again, and this went on and on until she finally reached a really, really low point. She had lost all 6 of her children to the child welfare system. She was on a really bad addiction run, and she ended up getting arrested for selling drugs and doing hard time in prison for about 4 years, when somehow she was able to find the strength to actually manage her path to long-term recovery. By the time I was connected with Angela and became her virtual editor, we never met because she was in Kansas the whole time. I was in Vermont. She had been in recovery for 8 years. She'd reconnected with 5 of her 6 kids. She was a family advocate working for the state of Kansas. She was giving talks around the country, and she'd written a 300-page memoir, which I found pretty darn impressive. So I agreed to take on the book. I wrote a contract. As with my buddy Scott, I didn't ask for any money up front. Unlike with my buddy Scott, I knew that Angela was, living on a pretty slim line there and didn't have much money. So I made a deal, which I thought was pretty darn generous. I said that she would pay me 1/3 of the contract amount when the book was written, and then the rest she could pay over 18 months as she supposedly, got money from the book. Angela was extremely grateful and so happy that I believed in her. And we had the best editing relationship. It really went swimmingly. We talked all the time. We emailed back and forth. She was very good about me making major changes just to tighten up the book and make it read better. By the end of it, she was absolutely delighted with the book, and I felt like it was a really solid book too. When that book came out, she called me up crying and said, Anne, thank you for bringing my book to life and for believing in me. I'm so grateful. She sent me a copy of the book, and I almost cried myself. It was, of course, autographed, but she had just written an absolutely beautiful preface giving me incredible credit for the work on the book. So I was feeling pretty good, and I sent my invoice and didn't hear back for a long time. Another, couple months went by, and I emailed Angela, and I said, Angela, 1/3 of the price is due now. She wrote me right back, and she said, oh, Anne, I'm sorry, I've had a couple of really hard months. I'll be paying you immediately. Nothing, silence. Another month goes by. I email again. Angela, I really worked hard on this book. I'm expecting the payment. Oh, I know, this is, I feel terrible. I'm sending you the money. This went on for several months. Finally, at about 5 months, I got a $25 check. Another few months go by, nothing. And I'm starting to get angry and feeling used. And my emails take on an entirely different tone. And I email her and I say, Angela, I'm really feeling betrayed here. I gave you my blood, sweat, and tears. I worked so hard on this. I worked way more than I ever expected to. You have this beautiful book. You're selling the book on Amazon. I really expect to be paid. Well, this went back and forth a few times until silence on her end. In the final, low, when I reached my low point, I threatened to take her to small claims court, which she and I both knew was an empty threat because I learned that I would have to travel to Kansas and spend 3 days there, which would have pretty much cost me what it cost, the whole price of the book. So I gave up after that. I was really pretty angry and disappointed, and obviously, you can tell in my voice, I still am. Years and years went by, and I don't know what it was, but something reminded me of Angela one day. And I just went and looked her up on Facebook. And there she was, selling her book, giving talks around the country, serving as a consultant for the federal government, and her Facebook page was full of hearts and flowers and beautiful, those wonderful sayings, treat each one as you wish to be treated, all these beautiful things. And oh my God, I just saw red. And before I knew it, I was writing her a really mean Facebook message. Angela, it's me, Ann. I can't believe you never paid me. How can this be? I am so angry still all these years later. Was I ever surprised when 20 minutes later, a long message comes back to me? Ann, you won't believe this, but I was just thinking of you. I don't believe it. I have been through such a difficult few years, and I'm just coming out of it, and I feel so guilty and so terrible. This is not the person I am. I don't want you to think of me this way. I'm going to start paying you immediately. Please send me your address if you've moved. I had moved. And I hope with all my heart that you will forgive me once I pay you back. Wow, I was surprised. I sent her my address. And I said, I will forgive you if I get paid back. And that was our last interaction exactly 1 year ago. Thank you.